Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Stormwall.com. I'm Mike Wilkerson, and this is part 3 in a series on inflation and money, with a particular emphasis on helping Americans and people throughout the Western world make sense of what is going on with their dwindling purchasing power, and importantly, what can they do about it. If you haven't seen the first 2 episodes and want to check them out, they're here on YouTube. I'll include links in the show notes below. So today, I want to carry on and I want to talk briefly about money in general, and then move on to talk about the state of money in America, where the currency is, of course, the US dollar. So first things first, what is it that makes money money? In order for something to be money, it should function in 3 ways. First, and most significantly, money should act as a store of value. Money turns your labor or your investment into something that can be traded for other things today, what economists call consumption, or saved up for the future, perhaps retirement, when income may not be as readily available as during, say, one's prime working years, or just a rainy day fund. Now, and this is important, for money to be good money, we need to add an additional word to better describe store of value. And that's the adjective stable. Money needs to be a stable store of value in order for it to be a good store of value, indeed, in order for money to be good money. And this, by the way, has been the complaint about the idea of Bitcoin as money, at least up to this point in its evolution. No one wants their money to be worth 100 today, say when you're paid from your work, 200 tomorrow, which of course that wouldn't be so bad, but then 50 the next day. And this is why, this is also why inflations are so pernicious. Inflation is the monetary equivalent of a mischief of rats eating away at and fouling all the grain you've diligently stored in your barn to survive a cold winter when nothing grows. Now, second, money must serve as a medium of exchange. For as far back as humans have existed, they have used something, whether it's shells, beads, coins, bones, paper currency, as a medium of exchange to simplify transactions across time and especially space, meaning long distances. The portability of money, especially compared with, say, a cow, means that money was always superior to barter. And despite a common misunderstanding about this, there's no historical or archaeological evidence of ancient civilizations being barter economies first and then moving to money economies. You know, the very first sale of land ever recorded in the Bible, when Abraham buys a plot of land in Canaan, Palestine does today, in order to bury his wife Sarah, this was negotiated and transacted using standardized and widely accepted pieces of silver. Barter economies arise when civilizations and their economies break down, such as during war, invasion, natural disaster, or government collapse, not when they are functioning well. And that was true in the ancient world as well, whether Babylonian civilization, ancient Chinese civilization, doesn't matter, wherever you look. Finally, money serves as a unit of account. It's a way to standardize the recording of values, of assets and liabilities, and thereby bring chaos into order. So these 3 features, store of value, medium of exchange, and a unit of account, are what makes money money. Now, there's a different, I think, very interesting way to think about money as a store of value that may help with this concept. And that is to think about money as a battery. Money is a battery in the sense that it's a store of energy for future use. Batteries allow us to separate the production of electricity from its use. And this happens across both time and space. You know, you don't have to go plug your iPhone into your local power company's hydroelectric dam or coal power station or nuclear power station to get it to work, nor do you have to consume the electron the second it travels across the cord to your phone. The iPhone's batteries store up that energy for you to use later. So money is just like that. In the case of money, that stored energy is financial value that the holder intends to be able to use in the future. Money stored as savings is the purchasing power, the energy, if you will, that individuals hope to eventually use to buy a home, to provide an education for their children, or retire in security. But what happens when that battery can no longer hold its charge? We've all experienced the frustration of an aging mobile phone that drains itself after just a few hours when it used to last for what felt like days. And by the way, it's probably time to replace mine for the same reason that I think about it. But a similar phenomenon is happening with the US dollar, and it's going to get worse. So inflation is rapidly depleting the energy stored as cash in consumer savings and retirement accounts. Now, while energy prices have eased in recent months, including gas now being well below $4 per gallon, it is my strong view that they're likely to move higher as winter approaches. And part of my message is to be aware and be prepared for that. Short-term price benefits such as the excess supply created by depleting the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve and similar releases in other countries are now running out. OPEC last month estimated that the emergency reserves in the 38 OECD countries, the modern countries in the Western world, are now at their lowest levels in 20 years. Europe today is without the natural gas normally supplied by Russia. The continent is facing an energy crisis so severe that in preparation for a long and dark winter, Europeans are going to the woods to chop firewood that can no longer be found in stores. This is true, look it up. Nonetheless, the European Union has confirmed that it will enforce its embargo on Russian oil later this year. OPEC Plus, the consortium of the oil producing and exporting members, like Saudi Arabia, Iran, et cetera, plus non-OPEC exporters, including Russia and Mexico, just met. They agreed to reduce production for October and presumably for the rest of the year in order to support higher prices and keep the pressure on the US and Europe. So in real terms, now just moving on to talk a little about this, in real terms, the things that we are buying today, it's not that they're worth more than they were in the past. Rather, it's that the dollar is losing its power, its store of energy to buy them. Now, while rising prices have been blamed by the Biden administration on everything from Russian President Vladimir Putin to COVID-19 to former US President Donald Trump, the real problem actually started long before any of those actors took the stage. So according to the US government's own consumer price index data provided by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the US dollar has lost 44% of its buying power since the turn of the century. That's just over 20 years ago. And by the way, it isn't the first time that Americans' buying power have been halved by inflation in less than a generation. In the Great Inflation of between 1965 and 82, the US dollar lost 2/3 of its value. Indeed, since the Federal Reserve was placed in charge of maintaining price stability back in 1913, the dollar has lost 97% of its value. So time and time again, Americans have borne the cost of the US government's pro-inflation policies, which in fact the Federal Reserve has enabled. Saving money for the future, which is a virtue and a bedrock in civilization in normal times, is now value destructive. Unspent cash is worth less and less each day, and it's better to convert those cash savings into real estate, or into real assets, whether commodities, real estate, collectibles, or even non-perishable food and other tangible goods whose value should grow with inflation. Now, on the other hand, if consumers start spending all their cash on consumption in fear of higher future inflation, then this itself can drive prices higher, and then worsening inflation becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's a tricky thing to navigate. What we do know is the value of the dollar will almost certainly continue to erode. This is going to further impoverish the working class and most retirees. Yet the debasement of the dollar has consequences far beyond Americans' purchasing power. As the dollar becomes worse and worse as a store of value, its role as a medium of exchange is also degraded. Eventually, foreigners see this, and they stop holding and using depreciating dollars for their transactions in favor of other alternatives. This is already happening in China and Russia and in parts of the world under these nations' growing spheres of influence. While the dollar has been remarkably strong recently against the euro and other currencies, kind of belying this idea that the dollar's under pressure of getting weaker, this is more of a reflection of weakness elsewhere, the EU, energy issues, war, etc., than a reflection of strength here in the US. The dollar is in for a hard landing once the effects of stimulus and money supply expansion are fully priced into global currency markets, which will eventually reflect the dollar's reduced value. The policy decisions of the Biden administration, especially in regard to energy, but also reflected in trillion-dollar stimulus packages, student loan forgiveness, which I've talked about recently, are aggravating inflation and eventually a corresponding debasement of the dollar. We can hope that Washington would eventually come to its senses on this and take steps necessary to rein in inflation before it's too late, but I wouldn't hold your breath. for whatever reason, we are clearly in a period of collective governmental madness that feels very unlikely to end anytime soon. Now, if the US dollar is no longer an esteemed global reserve currency, then the United States' role as a force for good in the world is also diminished. James Rickards, an expert on currencies and monetary matters, wrote right at the end of the global financial crisis, while all currencies by definition represent some store of value, the dollar is different. It is a store of economic value in a nation whose moral values are historically exceptional and therefore a light to the world. The debasement of the dollar cannot proceed without the debasement of those values and that exceptionalism. This idea that American exceptionalism is rooted in America's positive role in the world as a carrier of Western values, including the ideas of liberty, freedom of religion, democracy and free markets, free speech, free press, all of that was a key feature of former President Ronald Reagan's appeal to make America great again, his campaign slogan. President Reagan successfully brought left and right, labor and capital together to get the country out of the slump of the inflationary 1970s behind a shared aspirational idea that America was great because America was good. Now, I explore this controversial question of American exceptionalism, whether goodness or greatness, and the challenges to it in my upcoming book, Why America Matters. You can check it out and pre-order it at whyamericamatters.com. So that's it for today. I hope you're enjoying and getting something out of this series on inflation and money. If so, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. Don't forget to turn on the notifications bell so you're not missing out on new releases such as this one today. And sign up to our mailing list at stormwell.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.